Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophets Speak. Today we continue our study of the first book of Chronicles, that is Divrei Hayomim Aleph. We are about to study chapter 20. Um, we have just studied together chapter 19, where we heard of the battle against Ammon. Ammon had called the Arameans, the people of Aram, to defend them. The the armies of Yoav and Avishai destroyed the Arameans, who retreated and attempted again to attack the forces of David and failed. David subdued the Arameans, and the beginning of chapter 20, we continue with the story of what was the end result in Ammon. We're focusing back on Ammon, who tried to defend themselves against David after they had rebuffed David's peaceful overtures. So that's where we were up to. So and now that their defenders, their allies are gone, the people of Ammon are exposed. So Vayehi la'et to Teshuvat Hashanah. It was during the time of year when the time to do battle came back. Presumably during winter time, it was difficult to fight. So the battles against Aram took them till the end of the fighting season. Winter had passed, and now the fighting season had returned. La'et Teit HaMelachim, the time when kings do go out to do battle against other kings. So now Yoav took the opportunity to attack and finally subdue the Ammonites. So Vayinhag Yoav et Chel Hatzava. Yoav led the armies by Yashchet et Eretz Bnei Ammon, and he destroyed the land of the Ammonites, Vayovo, and he came Vayotzar et Rabbah, and he laid siege to Rabbah, which is the capital of Ammon, V'David Yoshev b'Yerushalayim. And at this time, David remained in Jerusalem. This fact was very important back when we studied the book of Samuel together, and I definitely refer you back to read the version there. David stayed back, and this led to the sin of Bathsheba and so on. This was a time David not being there to lead the people on his own as he had been until now was considered, something inappropriate that David had done. But this book in general, the book of Chronicles, as we will see and we've seen until now, only focuses on David as the hero, David and the good things that he did. It doesn't really focus, with one exception, which we'll see in the next chapter, it doesn't really focus at all on David's flaws. Not that Tanakh, not that the prophets tried to hide David's flaws. They were very explicit about them in the book of Samuel. But for the purpose of this telling of history, in the attempt to inspire the people to reestablish the second temple and the second commonwealth and reestablish the nation of Israel, David is being portrayed only his heroic side. But it does have a little hint here to remind you, that David had remained in Jerusalem, which should kind of raise your antenna so that you remember that David may not be as perfect as he is being portrayed in these verses here. So anyway, Vayach Yoav et Rabbah vayeher seha. So Yoav managed to strike down the city of Rabbah and destroy it. So he laid siege and he was successful. Rabbah could not hold against him. Vayikach David et ateret malkame al rosho. And David then took the crown of their king from the head of the king, Vayimtso'ah, and he found Mishkal Kikar Zov, that it weighed an entire kikar, entire talent of gold, Uba Evan Yakara, and embedded within it was a precious stone. Vatihi al Rosh David, and it was placed on the head of David as a symbol of the David conquering the king of Ammon. Ushlau ha'ir hotzi harbe mi'od, and he took a lot of booty from the city. Vieta Omasher ba, and the literal translation of this, and the nation that is within it. And we've seen this several times. This usually refers to those that represent the nation, the leadership, those that advised the king of Ammon to rebel against David instead of accept his peace overtures, those that were the leaders, those that would potentially rise up against David again as an enemy. He took out by Yasar Bamegera, and he cut them with a Megera, which is some sort of a iron a threshing instrument or a saw, uvacharitze habarzel, and with iron um, uh, um, chopping devices, uva megerot, and again with the threshing devices, v'chenya, so he killed them. V'chenya said David l'chol arei bnei Ammon. This is what he did to all the cities of the Ammonites. He took out their leaderships, the one that had rebelled. Vayashav David v'chol am Yerushalayim, and then David and the entire nation returned to Jerusalem. So from the context, it seems that after the victory was secured, David did come, but he wasn't there for the battle itself. Verse 4, so Ammon is now subdued. So we've just read of the subjugation of another one of the people's enemies. And we had heard that the Philistines, we had mentioned several times that they ceased to be a threat. However, they kept on popping up their heads. So we're going to read about some of these episodes in the next few verses in the remainder of this chapter. It was after this, Vatamod milchama begezer in Plishtim, and fighting broke out in Gezer with the Philistines. So the Philistines were not very cooperative subjects. So another fight broke out. So as he caused Sibchai Hachushati, so Sibchai from Chush, one of who fought on David's side, he struck down at Sipai, someone who his name of Sipai, who's Milidei HaRifaim, who's one who was born of the Rifaim. And who are these Rifaim? We'll see later some people of who are particularly large. Some people call them giants, but regardless, as we'll see very soon in a few verses from now, these Rephaim seem to be referring to those people that lived in the land that were particularly, genetically just tall and imposing. Vayikonehu, so this Sipai struck down this Sivchai. This Sipai, who was descended from the Rephaim, who we learned several chapters ago. The Rephaim themselves had been subdued already, but they still had descendants, so they subdued them. Vatihi od milchama taplishtim. There was another war against the Philistines. They continued to fight. Vayach Elchanan ben Yair, and another leader of David's troops, Elchanan, the son of Yair, he struck down at Lachmi, a person by the name of Lachmi, who was Achi Goliath Hagiti, who was the brother of Goliath, the famous Goliath from Gath, who David had cut down many years back during the days of the King Saul, when David was still a young man and not quite anywhere close to the position he had attained by the time we're reading now. But his Goliath apparently had a brother named Lachmi, and this Elchanan struck him down. The eighth Chaniso, and he was so large that the spear that this Lachmi held was Kimnor Orgim, was like the beam that's used by weavers. So again, it was a very large person. Apparently, this Goliath came from a family that was very large. Vatihi od milchama begat. There continued to be battles in Gat. Gat, which we said before, was taken over by David, but the people were still rebellious. Vayhi ish midan. There was a man who was very large, right? And this is where, just support to the fact that these Rifaim were large people. V'yatzba'otav sheish v'sheish esrim. He had 6 and 6 digits on every extremity. So he had 6 fingers. For a total of esrim v'arba, so a total of 24 digits. 6 toes on each foot, 6 fingers on each hand, and he was just a very large person. V'gam hu nolad l'harafa. He was also born of these Rifaim, who had been subdued as a force, but they still had descendants, and they were fearsome warriors. However, vayicharefet Israel, when he the best translation I've seen for this is he taunted the Israelites. He said bad things. He made fun. He rebelled. So Vayakeu Yehonatan ben Shema Achi David. Yehonatan, the son of Shema, who was one of David's brothers, struck him down. This is Yehonatan. Remember, David was very close friends with Yehonatan, who was the son of Saul, but Yehonatan was killed a while back. But apparently that name was given by one of David's brothers to his son. And this Yehonatan was responsible for taking down this threat of this giant man with many digits. These people, Noldu Harafa begat. They were born to the Rephaim, the large families of Gat. So they were probably of Philistine origin, or at least had mingled and settled among in the same place. And so there again, these people that were very large and imposing warriors were born there. Vayiplu biyad Davidu v'yad avadav. However, they were also subdued under David and his servants. So again, we're reading of the subjugation of the threats, and we've eliminated the Philistine threat, the Ammonite threat, the Edomite threat, the Aramean threat, and so on and so forth. All of these are no longer threats to David. They are all subservient to him. They are all paying tribute to him. And David is now is beginning to amass the wealth that comes with being a powerful kingdom. And the next chapter we will read of the only time David is brought up in a critical way in this book of Chronicles. Obviously, like I mentioned in the book of Samuel, there's plenty criticism of David, but in this chapter we read of his mistake, which he's about to make. I don't want to give it up too much. We'll study that together when we study chapter 21. Thank you so much for studying chapter 20 with me. Looking forward to studying chapter 21 and the rest of the book of Chronicles together. Have a wonderful day.